My name is Amara Jenkins, and in the eyes of the people who raised me, I've always been the black sheep, the quiet one, the charity case, the girl in the corner. I'm 28 now, and 2 days ago, we put the only two people who ever truly loved me into the ground. Today, we gathered in their lawyer's office to divide what they left behind, their legacy, their name, and, though none of us knew it yet, the truth. The office smelled like leather and lemon oil, the kind of room where power moves are made with polite smiles. We sat around a heavy mahogany table. My father, Pastor Marcus Jenkins, anchored one end in his perfectly pressed suit, a portrait of grieving dignity for anyone who didn't know better. My mother, Brenda, dabbing at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, sat quietly beside him, as if she were auditioning for the role of long-suffering wife. My brother, Jamal, leaned back in his chair, heavy and comfortable, whispering with his wife, Tiffany, who looked like a champagne flute, tall, pale, polished, and ready to be filled. I sat at the other end, hands folded in my lap. The disappointment. The failure. The family charity project who worked at a library, brought home old paperbacks like treasures, and knew how to keep her mouth shut. Mr. Strickland, my grandparents' Atlanta attorney, cleared his throat. I'd known him since I was 5. He was the kind of man who stacked his pens as neatly as his thoughts. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. "I will read the will of Elias and Loretta Bishop." The room held its breath. "To our granddaughter, Amara Jenkins, we leave the entirety of our public estate, valued at an estimated $30 million. We trust she will know what to do with it." Silence. Not stunned, not reverent. Dead. My mother's hand stopped moving. My father's jaw twitched. Jamal's smile slipped. Tiffany gasped out loud, and in that sound I heard math, hunger, and the kind of hatred that blooms when greed meets a closed door. "What did he just say?" she whispered, blue eyes fixed not on Mr. Strickland but on me, as if I had spoken through him. My father found his voice first. "Strickland," he said in the low tone he used when a sermon was about to turn into a threat. "There must be a mistake. Read it again." Mr. Strickland adjusted his glasses. "There is no mistake, Pastor Jenkins. The will was executed last month, in full possession of sound mind, witnessed by 3 independent parties." $30 million? Jamal blurted. He turned to me like a man who'd just been told his favorite couch was furniture he no longer owned. "For Amara? She works at a library. She doesn't even have a mortgage." "She lives with you," Tiffany snapped, jabbing a manicured nail in Marcus's direction. "This is insane. They were old. She manipulated them." "Mrs. Jenkins," Mr. Strickland said gently, "Elias and Loretta knew what they were doing." My mother finally dropped the thin pretense. "They left us nothing?" she hissed. "They left their son nothing? The man who runs the church? The man who held their hands?" I remembered differently. I remembered Sunday dinners gone quiet when Pop looked my father in the eye and said, "A man's ministry starts at home, Marcus. And your home looks like a trophy room from the Lexus dealership." I remembered storming off, slamming doors, silence. I remembered grocery runs with Big Mama, chess with Pop, afternoons clipping dead roses and talking about legacy. I remembered showing up, and I remembered who didn't. Jamal tried to recover his kindness face. "Amara," he said in his big brother voice, "you're not going to accept this. You'll split it. We'll fix it. 4 ways, like it's supposed to be." 3, Tiffany said, eyes cold. "She doesn't get a full share. She's the reason for this mess." There it was. The truth. Not family. Just wolves with napkins tucked in their collars. I'd kept my eyes on Mr. Strickland's hands as he turned pages. When I finally raised my head, he was watching me. He'd known. My grandparents had too. This wasn't just money. It was a mirror. It was a test. I took a breath that felt like stepping into cold water. "Pastor Jenkins," I said, and my father flinched at the title from my mouth. "The will is the will. I'm going to honor my grandparents' wishes." He started to roll out his pulpit tone. "Amara, think very carefully," Tiffany snapped. "No," she shrieked, standing so fast her chair screeched. "You don't get to talk, you worthless library girl. You think you can take our—" She lunged, not at me, but at the documents on the table, and snatched the will. I'll fix this. Mr. Strickland didn't even rise. That's a copy, Mrs. Jenkins. The original is with the court. Also, this meeting is being recorded. She froze, paper torn and trembling in her hands. My mother looked ready to faint. My father's jaw pulsed. Jamal stared, not at the papers, but at me, as if I had conjured the words to ruin his life. You did this, he mouthed. To us. No, I said, standing. You did this to yourselves. I thanked Mr. Strickland and walked out. I thought it was over. I was very wrong. Back home, the house felt like a loaded gun pointed at me. I went straight to my old room, shoved a duffel bag onto the bed, and started folding jeans with hands that didn't shake. I heard them before I saw them, the heavy, synchronized tread of people with a singular purpose. The door burst open. All four. My father's smooth face made of masks, my mother's face cracked with rage, Jamal lumbering forward, Tiffany already crying but with dry eyes. Amara, my father began, hands clasped, voice dipped in honey and gasoline. We were emotional, yes, but God blesses families for his work. You, my child, have been chosen as a steward. He laid down a neat stack of papers. We've already created the Bishop Family Community Fund. All you have to do is sign your inheritance over to the church, managed by me, for the good of the community. Today's unpleasantness will be a memory. I folded a t-shirt and said nothing. Brenda lunged. You ungrateful little thing, she snarled, nails digging crescents into my arm. We took you in, fed you, clothed you, after your mother— She spat the word, died. You owe us. Her face blurred with another memory. 18, the kitchen, the scholarship letter to Howard trembling in my hands. She had smiled, torn it into 4 perfect squares and whispered in my ear, good daughters stay home. Good daughters don't need foolish ideas. Let go of me, I said quietly. When she didn't, I shook her off. Jamal leaned into the doorway, blocking the only exit. What's your plan? Call the police? Don't be stupid. Tiffany stepped forward, cradling her belly like a prop. Please, she said softly, as if the word tasted like money. We were counting on this. We need a bigger house for the baby. It was perfect. The pious pastor, the wounded mother, the entitled son, and the fragile pregnant wife. A full court press. This wasn't a conversation. It was an ambush. They closed the circle around me. Sign the papers, Marcus commanded. Don't be selfish, Brenda hissed. Do it, Jamal whined. Think of the baby, Tiffany cooed. I stood slowly. I gathered the papers like precious things. I saw the relief slide across their faces, heard their breath loosen. I held their gaze as I tore the stack in half, then again, dropping the pieces like confetti onto the bed. No, I said. Silence, real silence, has weight. It pressed down on their faces, changed their colors. Tiffany moved first, shrieking something incoherent. My father raised his hand, not to hit me but to silence them, and when his eyes met mine, the mask was gone. Jamal, he said, so calm it was frightening. Get her out of my house. This, finally, was a language my brother understood. He grinned. With pleasure, Pop. He grabbed my shoulders and shoved. I stumbled into the hall. My bag hit the floor. Tiffany pounced and turned it upside down, scattering my clothes like confetti. Get out, Jamal said, shoving again. The front door yawned open, black and cold. The rain slapped my face. One more shove sent me sprawling off the porch. I caught myself on my hands and knees in wet grass, mud soaking my jeans. I looked up at them framed in warm light. Pastor Marcus slammed the door. The deadbolt thudded. The rain hummed all around me, gentle and relentless, washing their fingerprints from my skin. I stayed on my knees for one long breath. Then I stood, wrung rain from my hair, and reached into my purse. My phone felt cool and clean in my palm. Mr. Strickland? I said when he answered on the second ring. It's Amara, you were right. They've just thrown me out. I'm going to the Buckhead house now. I have the key Big Mama gave me. Yes, I'm safe. I called an Uber. I didn't care that it was an Escalade. I let the driver load my single muddy bag into the trunk and watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror like an ugly thought finally fading. My grandparents' Buckhead estate was white brick and quiet dignity, a Georgian with a spine of a house that had weathered storms. I walked through rooms that smelled like lemon oil and the past, and felt the first loosened threads of a knot that had been strangling me for 23 years. Slept in damp clothes on a guest bed that cradled me, and woke to the kind of sunlight that makes you believe in God. I showered. I wrapped myself in my grandmother's silk robe. In the quiet kitchen, I made coffee and sat at the breakfast table, looking out over a garden my grandmother loved. I had $30 million if Mr. Strickland's papers were to be believed. I had my grandparents' house. I had no job. I had no family, and I had peace. It didn't last long. The first engine whined loud and ugly as it halted at the gate. The horn blared. Voices rose in a familiar choir. I walked to the security panel and watched them on the small monitor. All four, Marcus, Brenda, Jamal, Tiffany, wrinkled, ugly with rage. Behind them, a sleek black Mercedes slid to a stop and a man stepped out. He was all angles and polish, late 60s, silver hair, Savile Row suit, case that said old money the way oxygen says life. He pressed the intercom. "Ms. Jenkins? Michael Harrison from New York. Your grandfather's counsel." I pressed the gate release. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Harrison." My family took my opening as an invitation and surged through, marching up the driveway like a conquering army. Harrison watched them pass as if he'd stepped around a mess on a sidewalk. I opened the front door and met them on the porch in my grandmother's silk robe. Harrison stood beside me and didn't spare them a glance. "Who are you?" my father demanded, immediately calculating that this was a man he could neither charm nor frighten. Harrison flicked his eyes over him like he might a piece of lint. "Are you Pastor Jenkins?" "I am Pastor Marcus." "I see," Harrison said, uninterested. He turned to me. "Ms. Jenkins, did you change the locks as I advised?" "I did, Mr. Harrison." "And the eviction notices we sent your parents? Did you sign them?" "I did." He turned back to them. "You are trespassing, and if you remain past the count of 10, I will call my good friend Chief Rollins of the Atlanta Police Department, who is quite eager to help Ms. Jenkins secure her property," Marcus blustered. Jamal fumbled with an old key. It jammed. Tiffany screamed something about family. Harrison checked his gold watch. 1. They fled. I watched their car bounce down the drive, tires squealing, pride shredded. Harrison gave me a small, brief smile. "Now, Ms. Jenkins," he said, stepping into the cool foyer. "Let's talk about the $30 million Mr. Strickland mentioned, and the money nobody else in that room knows exists." We sat in Pop's study. Harrison set his alligator briefcase on the desk and turned the latches with quiet deliberation. "Your grandparents were very fond of tests," he said. "Elias used to say, you find out who came to dinner by what they reach for first. The $30 million was the bait." "They knew exactly who would lunge," I nodded. "They all brought knives," he smiled a little. "And you brought composure. Good." He slid a leather portfolio across the desk to me. Inside was a stock certificate for something called Omnian Biopharmaceuticals. In 1995, Harrison said, "Your grandfather gave his friend, brilliant man, eccentric. You would have liked him, $50,000. For 2% of a company that didn't even exist when they made out the napkin. Your father told him to donate it to the church. Elias invested it. He transferred the equity through a sequence of irrevocable trusts your grandparents guarded with their lives. As of yesterday's close, $330 million. I stared at the number, and for the first time all day, I felt something close to awe. They left it all in trust for you. Ms. Jenkins, I remain trustee until your 30th birthday. But as of last week, your 28th, you are the managing director. Congratulations. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I felt a steady, rising strength I had never known. They trained you, Harrison said, watching me closely. The library wasn't an accident. They endowed it, gave you a quiet place to be underestimated, a librarian who reads. Meanwhile, we enrolled you in serious courses. Wharton Nonprofit Management, Harvard Portfolio Management. You've been running the Loretta Bishop Reading Fund all this time. $5 million. 40 programs across 3 states. You've been doing this work for years, Miss Jenkins. This inheritance is your graduation. It snapped into place like a lock catching. I wasn't lucky. I wasn't in over my head. I wasn't the girl who found herself with too many zeros on a piece of paper. I was the woman they had prepared. And now, Harrison said, voice turning practical, we let your family fight over the bait. They will sue. They will cry. They will smear. Meanwhile, we use the 330 to dismantle them with facts. Let them scream, I said. Let them think it's about 30 million. We'll use the real arsenal they couldn't even imagine I had. We didn't have to wait long. If my father had a superpower, it was spectacle. On Sunday morning, his watered eyes gleamed under the lights. The camera panned to Brenda, who now cried on cue. He said my name from the pulpit with heartbreak dripping from every syllable. He thundered about a demon of greed that had infiltrated his family and stolen money meant for the homeless. The youth center, the house of God. He called me a thief in front of 1,000 people and thousands more online. The comments poured in like acid. How could she steal from her own daddy? From her church? From a baby? Tiffany did her part that afternoon. In a shaky video filmed in a gray apartment with the blinds drawn, she clutched a swollen belly and whispered about my cruelty. She pointed to a corner of the room and said, that was supposed to be the nursery. She cried so beautifully I almost believed it myself. The GoFundMe posted moments later, Jenkins Family Justice Fund, a $250,000 goal. Help us fight for our family. The next day, the library fired me politely and publicly for being a distraction. It stung, more because of who they were than for what they took. The place had been a sanctuary until it wasn't. By Tuesday, a process server pressed a fat envelope into my hand. My family was suing to freeze the $30 million. They included sworn affidavits. A nurse I barely remembered claiming I withheld heart medicine and bruised my grandmother's arms. Tiffany testifying that I had told her I hated her and her baby, her true heir, and would get those old fools to sign everything to me. The judge granted a temporary injunction. The $30 million was frozen, house, accounts, investments. I was locked out of my inheritance by a signature and a lie. For about 30 minutes, I felt a fist close around my throat. Harrison watched me let it in. Then he saw it leave. They want a war, I said, voice level. Let's give them one. You read my mind, he said, and made a call that changed everything. They arrived within the hour. Miriam, human intelligence. Chen, forensic accountant. Alex, data miner with sugar for blood. We turned the guest house into a war room. Screens lit the walls. Coffee went cold and got replaced. The team fed on information and delivered it hot. Start with the nurse, I said. Nobody lies for free. Ah, Miriam said, that single syllable carrying an ocean of experience. They lie for debt. Chen found it. A $50,000 line of credit at the Beau Rivage in Biloxi. 3 months late, desperate. Miriam leaned on casino surveillance. By dinner, we watched video in 4K. There was Tiffany in sunglasses. There was Nurse Barnes. There was Jamal, grinning like he'd just been handed a trophy. Tiffany slid a white bank envelope across the counter. The nurse peeked and nodded. Jamal clapped her on the back. Cash bribe, Harrison said, his voice like dry ice. Next, I said. Alex mapped the GoFundMe funds to a shell account. Charges scrolled like crimes rolling downhill. The prosthetic belly, deluxe silicone in Caucasian skin tone, from a prop house in Los Angeles. A $25,000 wire transfer to Maserati of Atlanta. Jamal had captioned his private Instagram photo in the driver's seat. Hard work pays off, aber blessed. He was stupid enough to leave the location tag on. Now the church, Harrison said. Face like stone. Chen pulled land records, corporate filings. The Angel Fund, Marcus shouted from the pulpit, wasn't a church account. It was a private LLC, M. Jenkins Enterprises. He'd been laundering donations into land purchases for a decade. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. Embezzlement. Within 72 hours, we had everything we needed. The video of the bribe, the receipts for the fake belly, the bank logs for the Maserati, the shell company records. We didn't just hold enough to win the hearing. We held enough to bury them. The courthouse buzzed like an angry hive. My father's congregation packed the gallery. My mother wore black like she was attending her own funeral. Jamal slung an arm behind Tiffany in a practiced show of support. She cradled her belly like a holy relic. Krebs, their lawyer, strutted to the lectern and performed, reading Tiffany's affidavit with drama class tears, making Nurse Barnes sound like a saint. He pointed at me and called me unstable, abusive, a parasite. Judge Miller, gravel-voiced, unimpressed, turned to Harrison. Mr. Harrison? He stood like a surgeon. Our opponent's case rests on two pillars, motherhood and medicine, he said. We would like to examine both. He called Tiffany to the stand. She had not planned to testify. She swore on the Bible with a hand on her belly and tried to cry pretty. You're 8 months pregnant? Harrison asked. Yes, she said, voice trembling, hand resting on that silicone crescent. Then you must know Theatrical Props Incorporated, he said mildly. She blinked. No. Strange, he said, holding up a receipt. Your visa 6 weeks ago. A deluxe silicone 8-month pregnancy prosthetic, Caucasian skin tone. The courtroom erupted. Jamal shouted. The judge barked. The crowd sucked air like drowning people. Order. Tiffany's tears dried up. What replaced them was raw panic, Mrs. Jenkins, the judge said coldly. Are you or are you not pregnant? Yes. Then a tiny shake of the head she didn't even realize she gave. Harrison queued up the casino footage. There it was, Tiffany's envelope, the nurse's nod, Jamal's idiot grin. Nurse Barnes cracked like glass in the back row, shot to her feet, and started screaming that she was sorry, that they had forced her, that I had been good to them. Judge Miller didn't blink. She lifted the injunction like it was never there. She dismissed their motion with prejudice. She ordered the nurse into custody for perjury. She asked Harrison, politely and with the weight of the bench behind her, to forward everything to the district attorney. My family looked like they'd been drained and hung up to dry. We walked out of the courtroom into the bright heat of an Atlanta noon, and the news crews descended. Jamal shoved a camera. It caught everything he needed it to. The mask, the shove, the flinch. The internet did the rest. GoFundMe pulled the campaign and promised refunds. The district attorney's office issued warrants. They perp-walked Jamal and Tiffany within 24 hours. The news ran Tiffany's sob video side by side with the belly receipt and the Maserati statement. Marcus tried to go to church the next Sunday, but the deacons met him at the door and told him to find God somewhere else. The bank froze the parsonage. He was fired. He was homeless. He was finally powerless. For 2 weeks, I signed papers, took calls, and learned. Harrison's team was tireless and surgical. I slept in a bed that had held people who loved me and woke up in a home that finally felt safe. And then the intercom buzzed. They looked small. Not morally small, visibly small. Their clothes didn't fit the way they were supposed to. Their hair was unwashed. Brenda pressed the intercom with shaking hands. Amara, she sobbed. Baby, please. We have nowhere to go. I pressed the talk button. What do you want? They both flinched at the tone. Please, my mother said, real tears for the first time. We spent last night in a motel. Please. Marcus cleared his throat, searching for that voice that had always moved crowds. Daughter, he tried. I walked down the drive and stood just inside the gate, silk robe tied tight. They looked like strangers who had gotten lost and, in their confusion, found themselves at the wrong house. You still have it, don't you? Marcus asked urgently. The $30 million. Yes, I said. Or I did. What? Brenda said. The judge, she gave it to me. I gave it away. To who? Marcus's voice pitched into panic. Taxes? Lawyers? To Howard University, I said. $30 million endowed. The Loretta Bishop Scholarship. Full ride in perpetuity for first-generation Black women from Atlanta whose families tell them not to dream. Brenda folded, literally. No, Marcus looked at me with a shock so pure it made him honest. He didn't say, how dare you? He didn't say, what about us? He said nothing. Because for once he realized the truth had no space for his words. You're left with nothing, Brenda gasped, clutching the iron bars like a jail cell. You're as poor as we are. I almost laughed. That's your problem. You think the only currency is cash? I stepped back, let my robe slip from one shoulder, and smiled a smile that felt like 1,000 pounds set down. You fought like animals over the bait. You never stopped to ask what my grandparents really built. What? Marcus whispered, as if he were asking for a sign. $330 million, I said softly. The Bishop Trust, Omnian stock. The portfolio Pop nurtured while you begged for donations to your shadow company. The money you never knew to steal. They went very still. That kind of stillness only happens when a world ends. You were so busy calling me the black sheep you never realized I was being trained to be the wolf, I said. Get off my property. The police will see you out. I left them there. I went back inside. I pressed the button on the security panel. Flag them for permanent trespass, I told the guard. Never again. Under any circumstances, his voice crackled back. Understood, Ms. Jenkins. I poured a glass of water and stood under my grandparents' portrait. They looked out over the study the way they had always looked at life, with humor and a plan. Pop wore his favorite tie. Big Mama's pearls glowed. I cleaned the house, I told them. It's clean. The next morning, I called the governor. Ms. Jenkins, he said, voice all smooth charm. It's an honor. The West Atlanta Urban Renewal Project, I said. The Bishop Family Trust will fund it. $50 million. There was a beat of surprised silence. That is transformational. But there's a condition, I said. Pastor Marcus Jenkins's name is to be removed from the board of any city project, including this one, publicly, permanently. Another beat. Consider it done. I hung up and smiled at the portrait. My father had spent his life preaching about power he never had. I used a phone call to erase his name. This was what legacy felt like. Not money, but the quiet authority to move the world an inch toward good. People love to say blood is thicker than water. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes the blood is poison. Family is not a holy word. It's a choice you make when you show up for each other, when you tell the truth, when you put your hands in the soil and do the work. My little family, Marcus, Brenda, Jamal, taught me their lessons with violence and lies. My real family, Elias and Loretta, taught me with love and chess and trust funds I didn't know existed. The black sheep they mocked is the wolf they never saw. The sweetest revenge isn't screaming on the steps of a courthouse or throwing drinks in anyone's face. It's not baiting them into handcuffs or trending their worst lies with receipts. The sweetest revenge is doing what they only pretended they cared about, funding schools, building libraries, serving communities, with a checkbook they could never touch and a legacy they were never invited to. I wasn't left with nothing. I was left with everything that mattered, and a mission. If you've ever been the black sheep in your family, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, told to make yourself small, you're not alone. Your worth is not measured by other people's greed or their inability to see you. It lives in your resilience, your steady hands, your quiet, relentless decision to build the life they said you weren't allowed to imagine. Tell me your story. Tell me what you survived. Tell me how you found your way to the life that fits. You might not have $330 million, but I promise you, if you can let go of their version of you, if you can claim your own, what you have is worth more than any check anyone ever signed.